Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, खुश आमदीद, welcome back. बिजनेस इकोनॉमिक्स ECU 400 के लेक्चर नंबर 26 में खुश आमदीद. पहले की तरह we'll try to revise the previous lecture in a few minutes and then we'll proceed for today's lecture. So what we have learned in the previous lecture, we talked about the aggregate demand, how the aggregate demand, how the monetary and fiscal policy of the government can affect the aggregate demand in the economy. So as we know that aggregate supply curve is vertical, the short-run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. There are then the short-run aggregate demand curve is short-run aggregate demand curve and long-run aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. So there are theories that we have discussed in the last two lectures that can explain the downward sloping of aggregate demand curve, and those aggregate demand curve. And those three theories are the misperception theory, the sticky wage theory, and the sticky price theory. So these are the theory. Because of these theories, we can say that aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. And now, and then we have learned about the Keynes liquidity theory of preferences to explain the determinants of interest rate. According to this theory, the interest rate adjusts to balance the money demand and money supply, and then increase in the price level in the economy raises money demand and increases in interest rate. A higher interest rate, जैसा कि हमने देखा, higher interest rate reduces the investment demand and thereby the quantity demand for goods and services. So we have related the interest rate, the money demand, with the quantity demand of money. Then we have tried to link up the money market, the liquidity preference theory, with the slope of aggregate demand curve, and the downward aggregate demand curve slope expresses the negative relationship between the price level and the demand for goods and services in the economy. Now policymakers can influence the aggregate demand with monetary policy and fiscal policy. First we have seen that an increase in the money supply will ultimately lead to aggregate demand curve shift to the right. A decrease in money supply will ultimately lead to shift the aggregate demand curve to the left. Policymaker can influence aggregate demand with fiscal policy also. हमने देखा कि जो पॉलिसी मेकर हैं, गवर्नमेंट हैं, they can change or shift or influence the aggregate demand with the help of monetary and fiscal policy. जैसा कि हमने देखा कि by adopting monetary policy, government can change money supply and can bring a change in the aggregate demand in the economy. So by changing in money supply, by increasing or decreasing money supply, government can change the aggregate demand. So as we have also learned that government can also influence the aggregate demand with the help of or by fiscal policy. Now fiscal policy has two tools, जैसा कि हमने सीखा. दो tools हैं fiscal policy के. On one side, one tool is the government purchases, the other tool is the taxes, right? So government can adopt any of the tool and bring changes in the एग्रीगेट डिमांड. सो पिछले लेक्चर में हमने सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर की बात की थी कि किस तरह से गवर्नमेंट परचेजेस में तब्दीली आती है तो उससे एग्रीगेट डिमांड इफेक्ट होती है. सो increase in government purchases or cut in taxes shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. A decrease in government purchases, increase in taxes shift to the government shift the aggregate demand curve to the left. So when government alters spending, and the result shift in aggregate demand curve can be larger or smaller than the fiscal change, right? So उससे कम या ज़्यादा हो सकता है. जैसा कि हमने दो इफेक्ट हमने देखे कि whenever the government change its government purchases, its expenditure, it has two effects, macro effects. One is the multiplier effect, the other is the crowding out effect. In multiplier effect में हमने ये देखा कि the change in demand of goods and services is more than the change in government purchases. And in case of crowding out effect, Like suppose if the change in government purchases is $1, the change in demand for goods and services will be more than $1. So this is known as the multiplier effect. So a multiplier effect amplifies the change in demand for goods and services in the economy. But in case the crowding out effect tends to dampen the effects of expansionary policy on aggregate demand. There is this increase in aggregate demand in case of the crowding out effect, but not as much as we have in the multiplier effect. So this is known as the crowding out effect. So this was all about the previous lecture. सो आज का लेक्चर जो लेक्चर नंबर 26 है उसमें सबसे पहले हम उसके पहले हिस्से में हम बात करेंगे द पार्ट विच वी हैव नॉट कवर्ड इन द प्रीवियस लेक्चर ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर चैप्टर. दैट चैप्टर वाज अबाउट द इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ मॉनेटरी एंड फिस्कल पॉलिसी ऑन एग्रीगेट डिमांड. तो उसका जो रिमेनिंग हिस्सा है उस चैप्टर का सबसे पहले हम उसकी बात करेंगे. उसके बाद विल स्टार्ट द नेक्स्ट चैप्टर दैट इज अबाउट पॉवर्टी. तो विल स्टार्ट द रिमेनिंग पार्ट ऑफ द प्रीवियस चैप्टर और द प्रीवियस lecture first. So as we discuss the effect of government purchases on the aggregate demand, the second tool of fiscal policy is the taxes. So changes in taxes can also affect the aggregate demand in the economy. Now when the government cuts personal income taxes, it increases aggregate demand of goods and services in the economy. So a cut in taxes, reduction in taxes increases household take home pay, and it will increase household save some of this additional income and then spend some part of the additional income on goods and services. Increased household spending on goods and services shift aggregate demand to the right. So जब government taxes कम करती है, रिड्यूस करती है, कट करती है, तो उससे लोगों की जो इनकम है, टेक होम इनकम जो है वो बढ़ जाती है. उनकी इनकम जब बढ़ती है तो उसका कुछ हिस्सा एडिशनल इनकम का वो सेव कर लेते हैं और जो कुछ हिस्सा उसके एडिशनल इनकम का है वो स्पेंड करते हैं ऑन द परचेज ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, चीज़ों पे खर्च करते हैं. राइट. तो जब स्पेंडिंग बढ़ती है चीज़ों पे खर्च करने पे, व्हेन द स्पेंडिंग ऑफ consumer increases on the purchase of goods and services, this increase the aggregate demand of goods and services and shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. So it is so we can say so that this change is also determined by the household perception about the permanency of the change in taxes. How taxes it is people this change in demand of goods and services also depends on the individuals or the consumers or the firm's perception about the permanency of the change in taxes. How permanent change is that? Whether it is a permanent change or it is the short-term change or the long-term change. So this perception can also affect the savings as well as consumption of goods and services in the economy. So we can say that government either can adopt so by adopting fiscal policy to change the aggregate demand, to influence the aggregate demand. So government has two tools. One is the government purchases, जिसका हमने पिछले लेक्चर में बात की, और अभी जो हमने बात की आज के लेक्चर में जो हमने बात की, the other tool for fiscal policy is the taxes. So by changing taxes, bring change in taxes either upward or downward. By reduction in taxes, by increase in taxes, government can alter or change the demand of goods and services, and which in turn can affect the aggregate demand of goods and services in the economy. So when there is change in aggregate demand, so this will shift this can shift the aggregate demand curve rightward or leftward. So if there is a cut in taxes, this will increase demand, this aggregate demand, and the aggregate demand curve shift rightward. If there is increase in tax, this will reduce the aggregate demand and the aggregate demand curve shift to the left side. Right. So but it also depends on the household or the individual perception about the permanency of the tax change, how they perceive that change, whether it is a short-term change or the long-term change or it is a permanent change. Right. So again, this can affect the consumption or the demand of goods and services in the economy. So this is how taxes, which is another tool of fiscal policy, can influence the aggregate demand in the economy. Now, using policy to stabilize the economy, different governments, different countries have their policies to stabilize their economies. Here, if we talk about U.S. economy stabilization has been explicit goal of U.S. economy since Employment Act 1946. इसी तरह जितनी भी बाकी इकोनॉमीज हैं, each country, each economy has their own policies, stabilization policies, to make the economy stable, or to increase the growth rate in the economy by stabilizing the economy. So if we talk about this particular Employment Act of 1946 in the US government to stabilize the economy, so that act has two implications. One, the government should avoid being the cause of economic fluctuation. Government should not be the part of economic fluctuation in the country, right? They should avoid as maximum as they can. So in this way, the government can stabilize their economies. Second, the government should respond to change in the private economy in order to stabilize the aggregate demand, right? So government must respond whenever there is change in the private economy in the country, right? So in this way they can change or stabilize the aggregate demand in the economy. So the Employment Act 1946 in US economy has two effects, two implications. One, that government should avoid to become a cause of economic fluctuation in the country. Second, and the government should respond to the changes in the private economy in order to stabilize the aggregate demand in the economy. Some economists argue that monetary and fiscal policy destabilize the economies. Monetary and fiscal policy affect the economies with a substantial lag in the country. तो कुछ economists ये कहते हैं कि ये जो monetary and fiscal policies हैं, इनसे economy destabilize होती है. They suggest that वो ये कहते हैं economy should be left to deal with the short-term fluctuation on its own. Economy को अपने हाल पे छोड़ देना चाहिए. जो short-term fluctuation है, there are automatic stabilizer. Instead of using monetary and fiscal policy, economy को अगर आप अपने हाल पे छोड़ देते हैं, short-term fluctuation जो है itself adjust हो जाती हैं, and those adjustment because of the automatic stabilizer in the economy. तो there are automatic stabilizer in the economy. तो किसी economy में short run में जो fluctuation आती हैं, those fluctuations can be adjusted itself by those automatic stabilizers. तो वो ये कहते हैं कि short run fluctuation के लिए monetary और fiscal policy को use नहीं करना चाहिए. Automatic stabilizers are changes in the fiscal policy that stimulate aggregate demand in the economy. When the economy goes into recession without policy makers having to take any deliberate action, if we allow automatic stabilizers, so they can bring equilibrium or stability in the economy. So automatic stabilizers includes the tax system and some form of government spending. So the automatic stabilizer it includes the tax system of the economy of the country, as well as some sort of government spending that can play a role when there are fluctuations in the economy in the short run. So tax system or जो government spending कुछ गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग है, ऑटोमेटिकली ये एक्टिव होती हैं, इन्वॉल्व होती हैं, मूवमेंट इनमें चेंजेस आती हैं, और द इकोनॉमी कम्स बैक into equilibrium or become stable, right, instead of introducing using monetary or fiscal policy in the economy. So this was the remaining part of the previous chapter, previous lecture, जिसमें हमने बात की and जिसमें हमने देखा how the monetary and fiscal policy can influence the aggregate demand and aggregate demand in the economy. Now we'll come to the we'll come to the next part of the today's lecture, which is about poverty. तो आज सेकंड पार्ट जो सेकंड हिस्सा है आज के लेक्चर का, उसमें हम पॉवर्टी की बात करेंगे, गुर्बत की बात करेंगे. So what we are going to learn under poverty, तो poverty में हम बात करेंगे about introduce करेंगे what is poverty, what is the relationship between poverty and growth, how growth can affect poverty, उस पे बात करेंगे. उसके बाद हम बात करेंगे what are the types of poverty, and then we'll talk about poverty indices की बात करेंगे, and lastly how we estimate the methods of estimating poverty, poverty को कैसे estimate कर सकते हैं, कैसे measure कर सकते हैं. So these are the things which we are going to learn in this chapter of poverty, right? So we start with the introduction. Poverty introduction से करते हैं कि what is poverty, how we can define poverty, and in the country or in the world. So poverty has many dimensions. The poor have not only low income but also lack access to basic needs such as education, health, ड्रिंकिंग वाटर एंड प्रॉपर सैनिटेशन. तो पावर्टी का सिर्फ ये मतलब नहीं है, पावर्टी डज नॉट सिंपली मीन्स दैट इफ द पीपल हैव और द इंडिविजुअल हैव लोअर इनकम तो हम कहते हैं कि वो गरीब हैं. सिर्फ इट हैज़ मैनी डायमेंशन, इसकी बहुत सारी ये जो डायमेंशंस हैं, लाइक इनकम की कमी की वजह से हम ये नहीं कहते कि लोग गरीब हैं, कि उनके लोग गरीब हैं बिकॉज ऑफ द लो इनकम, बट there are some other factors like if the people have lack of access to some basic needs like health, education, clean drinking water and sanitation, in basic needs की कमी होती है तो उनको भी हम कहते हैं कि the people, those sort of people are also poor. Right, so poverty has many dimensions. It's not limited to only low income, but also some other basic facilities. If the people or individual are lacking those facilities, तो हम कहते हैं कि they are poor. The lack of access to basic needs undermines the capabilities of the poor, limits their opportunities to the secure employment, and therefore they result in their social exclusion and exposes them to exogenous shocks. Right, so जब हम ये कहते हैं कि they are lack of those basic facilities, so basically they are exposed to different shocks in the economy, and then it would be difficult for them to basically deal with those shocks. The vicious circle of poverty is accentuated when the governance structures exclude the most vulnerable from the decision making process. Right, तो जब government or the governance जो है, जब आप you don't involve or don't consider when you're making decisions, important decisions about the economy, what basic facilities, basic necessities are required for the most part of the society, major part of the society. जब उनको आप नहीं करते, इन्वॉल्व नहीं करते, उनको नहीं देखते, उनके बारे में नहीं सोचते, कौन सी फैसिलिटीज चाहिए, कौन सी बेसिक ज़रूरियात चाहिए, राइट. तो पॉवर्टी जो है, दिस इज accentuated, become evident and there. सो पावर्टी की बहुत सारी डायमेंशंस हैं, लॉट ऑफ डायमेंशंस ऑफ पावर्टी. सिर्फ हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि अगर लोगों की इनकम कम हो तो लोग गरीब है. अगर उनको बेसिक ज़रूरियात नहीं मिलनी, लाइक एजुकेशन की फैसिलिटी नहीं है, हेल्थ की फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं है, सैनिटेशन की प्रॉपर फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं है, साफ़ पीने का पानी नहीं मिल रहा, तो उन लोगों को भी हम कहते हैं कि दे आर कंसीडर्ड पुअर. नाउ fight against poverty. Now we'll talk about how we can relate growth with poverty. Growth, poverty nexus की बात करेंगे. The fight against poverty represent the greatest challenge of our times. Considerable progress has been made in different parts of the world in reducing poverty. दुनिया के मुख्तलिफ हिस्सों में बहुत सारी कोशिशें की गई हैं, एफर्ट्स की गई हैं टू रिड्यूस द पावर्टी by using different policies by different governments in their economies. The proportions of people living in extreme poverty on global level fell from 28% in 1990 to 21% in 2001 on the basis of $1 per day, right? तो because of those efforts जो कि मुख्तलिफ ममालिक में की गई हैं गुर्बत को कम करने के लिए, उसकी वजह से जो ग्लोबल लेवल पे जो पावर्टी में कमी आई है, दैट इज़ फ्राम 28% टू 28% to 21% from 1992 and 2001. 10 सालों में इतने 7% के करीब गुर्बत में कमी वाक़ हुई है. अगर if we talk about an absolute number, the reduction during that period is about 130 million people have उसमें कमी वाक़ हुई है, with the emphasis, with the most of it's coming from China. तो major contribution or the major part जो 130 million में is from China. तो चाइना में सबसे ज़्यादा गुर्बत में कमी वाक़ हुई है. In sub-Saharan African countries, the number of poor actually increased by 100 millions during that period. In 10 सालों में अगर हम अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज़ की बात करें तो वहाँ पे गुर्बत में इजाफा हुआ है, that is about 100 million. And if we talk about Central and Eastern Europe, also witnessed a dramatic increase in poverty during that time period. Incidents of poverty, however, decline in South Asia. South Asia में इस पीरियड के दौरान गुर्बत में कमी वाक़ आई है. And in South Asia, Latin America and Middle East. So if we talk about in different parts of the world, तो कहीं पे इस पीरियड के दौरान इन 10 सालों में गुर्बत में कमी वाक़ हुई, कहीं पे इजाफा हुआ है. राइट, सो दिस इज़ ऑल because every government, each government is fighting against poverty and they are trying to introduce different policies which can reduce poverty in their economies. The recent trends in global, regional and national poverty clearly suggest one thing. जो recent trends अगर आप देखें at regional level, at national level or at global level about poverty, that clearly suggests that stronger economic growth over a prolonged period, लंबे अरसे के लिए is essential for reducing poverty or poverty reduction. तो एक चीज़ तो बहुत क्लियर है, अगर रिसेंट ट्रेंड्स देखें, अगर आप पाकिस्तान की बात करें, रीजन्स की बात, पर्टिकुलर रीजन की बात करें, यू टॉक अबाउट पर्टिकुलर नेशनल पॉवर्टी की बात करें, इफ वी टॉक अबाउट ग्लोबल पॉवर्टी की बात करें, वन थिंग इज़ वेरी क्रिस्टल क्लियर दैट स्ट्रॉन्गर ग्रोथ, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ फॉर ए प्रोलॉन्ग टाइम पीरियड इज एसेंशियल फॉर पॉवर्टी रिडक्शन. सो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ रिड्यूसेस पॉवर्टी बिकॉज एवरेज इनकम्स ऑफ द पुअर टेंड टू राइज. तो जब किसी मुल्क में, किसी इकोनॉमी में जो ग्रोथ बढ़ती रहती है, लॉन्ग टर्म के लिए बढ़ती रहती है, जो एवरेज इनकम है पुअर्स की, it start rising, right? So and then with then what will the result is that the result is robust over time and across countries and regions. So you can compare, you can see that the result will be robust and across the regions, across the countries. If we talk about empirical evidence regarding poverty, that empirical evidence suggests that if there is a 1% increase in growth or increase in annual rate of growth in a country is associated with the reduction of 0.9% of poverty in that particular country or the people living below poverty line. तो अगर किसी जो empirical evidence है, research जो है, वो ये शो करती है, वो ये साबित करती है, अगर किसी मुल्क में 1% ग्रोथ में इजाफा होता है तो उस मुल्क में जो पावर्टी में कमी आती है, the people who are living below poverty line, that would be about 0.9%. So this is so from this result we can say that the stronger growth for a longer time period is very essential, is very, very important for poverty reduction in any country and any economy of the world. We'll continue with how growth can affect poverty. At the macro level, if we talk about the macro level, because poverty or growth is the macro concept, so at a macro level, economic growth implies greater availability of public resources. So greater availability of public resources to improve the quality of life, quality and quantity of life, like education, health and other services, right? So when we talk about हम ये कहते हैं कि economic growth जो है it implies a greater availability of public resources, like if we talk about education, about health and other services. अगर किसी मुल्क में growth हो रही है तो these resources or the public resources are available to the people at a larger scale, and as far as quality and quantity is concerned, that is available to the people in the country. At a micro level अगर बात करें, economic growth creates employment opportunities, increase the income of the people and therefore reduce poverty. So even if we talk about macro level, if we talk about micro level, जब हम मैक्रो लेवल की बात करते हैं तो मैक्रो लेवल पे जो है it implies greater availability of public resources to the people of the country, to the society of the country, to the economy, to the people of the country, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of communication. So lot of public resource increase, there will be increase in public resources with increase in growth rate in the country. At micro level अगर हम बात करें तो increase in growth leads to increase in unemployment, increase in employment in the country, raises income. जब income उनकी बढ़ती है तो that reduce poverty in the country. So many developing countries have succeeded in boosting growth for a short period, but only those that have achieved high economic growth over their long period have been lasting reduction in poverty. Like for example, if we talk about East Asia, if we talk about China, are the classic example who have maintained long-term growth. ऐसे डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज जिनमें मोस्ट ऑफ द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज जिनकी अगर हम बात करें तो द ग्रोथ दे हैव सक्सीडेड इन बूस्टिंग इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ फॉर ए शॉर्ट पीरियड ऑफ टाइम ओनली. बहुत सारे ऐसे ममालिक हैं जिनमें इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ जो है शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए बढ़ी है, लॉन्ग टर्म के लिए नहीं बढ़ी. बट इफ़ वी टॉक अबाउट some countries, like if we talk about East Asia, if we talk about China, these are the countries who have maintained their economic growth for a longer time period, right, and which has helped to reduce poverty in their countries. Growth, however, does not come automatically. राइट. सो अगर हम ग्रोथ की जब हम बात करें, हम ये कह रहे हैं कि ग्रोथ अगर किसी मुल्क में होती है, जीडीपी बढ़ती है, तो उससे पब्लिक रिसोर्स भी बढ़ते हैं मैक्रो लेवल पे, और माइक्रो लेवल पे एम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ती है, इनकम बढ़ती है और पॉवर्टी में कमी वाक़ होती है. और हमने ये भी कहा कि जिन ममालिक ने एक लंबे अरसे के लिए इस ग्रोथ इंक्रीज इन ग्रोथ को मेनटेन किया है, जैसे कि हमने बात की एग्जांपल्स हमने दी, ईस्ट एशिया कंट्रीज़ की बात की, कोरिया, जापान, इनकी बात की, and then we have talked about China. So these are the best example who have maintained growth for a longer time period. तो वहाँ पे substantial कमी आई है poverty में, and those country and most of the developing countries they have only boosted their growth for a short term period. तो थोड़े अर्से के लिए जब ग्रोथ में तब्दीली आती है तो poverty में उतनी ज़्यादा कमी नहीं आती. लेकिन एक सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि what are the factors, what are the factors that determines growth, that help us to increase growth in the economy? It requires policies that will promote growth. Macroeconomic stability is requires how budget and current account deficits are maintained, and low inflation in the economy, stable exchange rate, and therefore key elements, parameter to sustain economic growth in the country. In Pakistan, 6.8% economic growth is required to reduce poverty in the country, right? So अगर हमने बात करनी है कि अगर हमने if we have to maintain economic growth for a longer time period, तो उसके में हमें बात करनी पड़ेगी, we have to reduce budget deficit, we have to reduce current account deficit, हमें inflation जो कम रखना पड़ेगा, exchange rate stable, we have to make our exchange rate stable. So these are some of the important parameters. Population में हमें कंट्रोल करना पड़ेगा, पॉपुलेशन को कम करना पड़ेगा, नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज को यूज़ करना पड़ेगा, रिसोर्सेज बढ़ाने पड़ेंगे. तो ये ऐसे फैक्टर्स हैं which are very important to boost to sustain growth in the long run. If we talk about Pakistan, how much growth is required in the long run to reduce poverty. About 6.8% growth, 6 to 8% growth is required to reduce poverty in Pakistan. If we talk about individual country expenses, we have different scenarios. So for example, despite higher economic growth, there are some countries which have not completely reduced poverty from their countries. Like if we talk about Thailand, so the reduction in poverty has been modest. Malaysia has been able to achieve both high economic growth and impressive reduction in poverty. इसी तरह अगर बांग्लादेश की बात करें, on the other hand, they has dramatically reduced poverty in the spite of low economic growth. तो अगर आप individual countries के experiment की बात करते हैं, तो different countries have different scenarios, different results. तो जिसमें हमने बात की, अगर हम जैसा कि हमने कहा, despite of higher growth rate, sustained growth rate, there are some countries who have reduced poverty at the modest level like Thailand. इसी तरह अगर हम मलेशिया की बात करें, मलेशिया में दोनों इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ भी बढ़ी है और दूसरी साइड पे पॉवर्टी में भी रिडक्शन हुई है एट सब्सटेंशियल लेवल. एंड इसी तरह बांग्लादेश ने भी अपनी पॉवर्टी को काफ़ी हद तक कम किया है एट ए लोअर ग्रोथ रेट. सो पॉवर्टी और ग्रोथ का बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट और क्लोज रिलेशनशिप है. अगर किसी मुल्क में इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ हो रही है, जीडीपी बढ़ रही है, तो उससे पर कैपिटा इनकम बढ़ती है और जो लेवल ऑफ पॉवर्टी है, जो पीपल हु आर लिविंग बिलो पॉवर्टी लाइन कैन बी रिड्यूस्ड. बट अब क्वेश्चन ये राइज होता है कि किस तरह से ग्रोथ को बढ़ाया जाए, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को बढ़ाया जाए. सो उसके लिए देयर आर डिफरेंट पैरामीटर्स. इकोनॉमी में वेरिएबल्स होते हैं जिनको आपने बढ़ाना है, कंट्रोल करना है. लाइक बजट डेफिसिट है, बजट सरप्लस है, बजट करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट की बात करें, इन्फ्लेशन की बात करें, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की बात करें, उसको कम करना पड़ेगा आपको. एंड यू हैव टू स्टेबलाइज योर एक्सचेंज रेट. स्टेबल एक्सचेंज रेट पॉलिसी आपको इंट्रोड्यूस करनी पड़ेगी. इसी तरह स्टेबल मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी इंट्रोड्यूस करनी पड़ेगी कंट्री में. सो यू हैव टू introduce or use these variables to stabilize the economy and sustain the long-run growth if the countries are interested to reduce poverty in the economy. Now we'll talk about bit growth versus quality of economic growth. अभी तक हमने बात ग्रोथ की इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ की बात की, बट हाउ वी कैन डिफरेंशिएट. बट एक्चुअली द रिक्वायर्ड जो चीज़ है दैट इज द क्वालिटी ऑफ इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ. नॉट ओनली ग्रोथ, but we need growth or the quality of growth. Now for poverty reduction, it is the quality of growth which is more important than the growth only. So we should concentrate on the countries who are interested, who want to reduce. ऐसे ममालिक जो गुर्बत को कम करना चाहते हैं, पॉवर्टी को रिड्यूस करना चाहते हैं, उनको सिर्फ ग्रोथ की बात नहीं करनी चाहिए. They should not talk about growth. Growth is not as important, but the important factor is the quality of growth. The quality of growth is important, not the growth, to reduce poverty in a country. तो किसी मुल्क में जब आप interested हैं, if the economy or the governments are interested to reduce poverty, they should consider the quality of economic growth, not the growth only. Now what we mean by quality of growth? Quality of growth implies inclusive growth. Now what we mean by inclusive growth? Growth coming from sectors which employ more unskilled and low skilled workforce. तो ऐसे सेक्टर्स पे जोर दिया जाए, ऐसे सेक्टर्स पे फोकस किया जाए, ऐसे सेक्टर्स को बढ़ाया जाए, ग्रोथ दी जाए जहाँ पे जो सेक्टर्स, जिन सेक्टर्स में मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम दो सेक्टर एम्प्लॉय लो एंड अनस्किल्ड लेबर फोर्स को एम्प्लॉय करते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल, कंट्रीब्यूशन टू द ग्रोथ कमिंग फ्रॉम द एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर, पर्टिकुलरली इन लाइफ स्टॉक एंड डेयरी सेक्टर्स. एसएमईज की बात करें, हाउसिंग की बात करें, कंस्ट्रक्शंस की बात करें, इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी की बात करें. सो दीज आर द सेक्टर. ये ऐसे सेक्टर हैं जहाँ पे नॉर्मली लो और अनस्किल्ड लेबर फोर्स को एंगेज किया जाता है, एम्प्लॉय किया जाता है, राइट. सो द गवर्नमेंट शुड अडॉप्ट ग्रोथ स्ट्रेटजीज फॉर दोज सेक्टर्स विच एम्प्लॉय low or unskilled labor force, right? So if they concentrate on those factors, so that is the inclusive growth or the quality growth. So would be more poverty reducing growth or pro-poor growth, or you can say that growth would be inclusive growth, right? So growth is necessary but not sufficient condition to reduce poverty. Strategy of promoting growth must be accompanied by improvement in opportunities for the poor. That is, it must be accompanied by higher investment on people, technical training, vocational training, and improvement in delivery of social services, right? So growth is important for reduction in poverty, but it is not necessary, right? It's necessary but not sufficient condition to reduce poverty. ग्रोथ को आप अकम्पनी करना चाहिए, ग्रोथ के साथ साथ आपको दूसरी चीज़ों का भी ख्याल रखना चाहिए. You should, the economies or the countries should concentrate on the training, vocational training, and on the टेक्निकल ट्रेनिंग की बात करें, इम्प्रूवमेंट इन द डिलीवरी ऑफ द सोशल सर्विस की बात करें. तो इन बेसिक जो नेसेसिटीज़ हैं, जो लोगों के जो लेबर फोर्स की स्किल के इम्प्रूव करने के मेथड्स हैं, तरीके हैं, उन पे भी इकोनॉमीज़ को कंसंट्रेट करना चाहिए. तो ग्रोथ इज़ आल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट, नेसेसरी फॉर रिड्यूसिंग पॉवर्टी, बट इट इज़ नॉट सफिशेंट. ग्रोथ के साथ साथ पैरेलली आपको ऐसे प्रोग्राम चलाने हैं जहाँ पे आप लेबर फोर्स को ट्रेन कर सकें, स्किल लेबर फोर्स बना सकें, और ट्राई टू इंक्रीज द सोशल सर्विसेज इन द इकोनॉमी. तो ग्रोथ के साथ साथ इन चीज़ों को भी सोचना चाहिए. अगर आपने गुर्बत को कम करना है, पॉवर्टी को कम करना है, तो दीज आर इम्पोर्टेंट एलिमेंट्स बिसाइड्स ग्रोथ if the country is really interested to reduce poverty from their economy. Now, after discussing the relationship between poverty and growth, how we can define poverty actually? What is the definition of poverty? Poverty is generally defined as the lack of resources, lack of command over resources to satisfy basic needs such as food, shelter, clothing. Right? So poverty is generally defined as the lack of command over resources to satisfy basic needs such as education, shelter, clothing, food, and so on. This approach is basically an income approach, as it measures the degree of lowness of income or consumption in the society. So this sort of approach is known as the income approach, because it measures the degree of lowness of income or consumption in the society. So this is a unidimensional approach to poverty, which views poverty as income or consumption deprivation. If the people are deprivated by consumptions or income, so we can say that this is known as a unidimensional approach to measure unidimensional approach to poverty. Poverty is not a unidimensional approach, it is a multidimensional approach, a multidimensional phenomena. Poverty should be viewed as the deprivation of basic needs, basic capabilities such as ill health, lack of education, vulnerabilities, powerlessness, and social deprivation, right? So जहाँ पे आप कंजम्पशन और इनकम की बात करते हैं कि द पीपल हु आर पुअर, हु हैव लो इनकम, जिनकी इनकम कम होती है, कंजम्पशन कम होती है, उनको हम गरीब कहते हैं. दे आर टर्म्ड एज ए पुअर, और पॉवर्टी को डिफाइन करते हैं. उसके साथ इट इज़ सो वी कैन नॉट से दैट पॉवर्टी इज़ ओनली लिमिटेड टू लो इनकम और लो कंजम्पशन इन द सोसाइटी. सिर्फ उन लोगों को हम गरीब नहीं कहते, बट द पीपल आर, दोज पीपल आर आल्सो पुअर who have low income, low consumption, and also that they are deprivated from the basic facilities, basic necessities of life, like education, health facilities, and basic social services. तो इनकम कंजम्पशन लो होने के साथ साथ अगर लोग डेप्रीवेटेड हैं, उनको कम फैसिलिटीज़ मिलती हैं ऑफ बेसिक लाइफ, सो उनको भी हम दे आर कंसिडर्ड एज ए पुअर, और दे आर इन दी पॉवर्टी, अंडर दी पॉवर्टी लाइन. So poverty is not a unidimensional concept, it is a multidimensional phenomena. So we have to look at the different dimensions if we are interested to reduce or to curb poverty. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of this unidimensional versus multidimensional? So unidimensional approach is simple to use, is easy to use, easy to understand. तो simply जब हम ये अगर आप if you want to define poverty, so simply आप कह सकते हैं by using unidimensional approach, those people, those individuals who have low income, low consumption, so they are considered as a poor. So but if we talk about multi-dimensional approach, which is more broader but it is complex, जिसमें हम income की बात भी करते हैं, consumption की बात भी करते हैं, but we also discuss the basic facilities which are available to the society, right, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of sanitation, in terms of drinking water and social services and so on. अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि लोगों कुछ ममालिक में, कुछ countries में, in some countries, if those facilities are not available to the people up to the mark, so we can say that the people or the society or the individual are considered as a poor people. So we can say that poverty is a unidimensional as well as multidimensional phenomena or concept. Now we'll talk about the types of poverty. Now there are three types of poverty normally which we talk about, and one is the relative poverty, the other is subjective poverty, and the third is absolute poverty. How we can differentiate among these three types of poverty? So first we talk about the relative poverty. A relative poverty line is set around 50% of the average per capita income of the country. तो उसके around हम set करते 50% of the population of the average. So average the relative poverty line is set around the 50% of the average per capita income of the country. This measure is typically used in developing country. Now what is the drawback of this country? This measure, poverty line is not constant, moves upward with the rise in per capita income and moves down with the decrease in per capita income. Therefore, it is not appropriate to measure poverty in developing countries by using this relative poverty measure, right? तो इसको हमने सिर्फ इनकम के साथ रिलेट किया है, पर कैपिटा इनकम के साथ रिलेट किया है दिस, और अगर सिर्फ इनकम के साथ जब आप रिलेट करते हैं पावर्टी को, तो whenever there is increase in income, पावर्टी में कमी आती है, जब इनकम में इजाफा और कमी होती है तो पावर्टी में इजाफा हो जाता है. तो it is so power moves upward with the rise in income, so there is change. Poverty is not constant over the time period, it keeps on changing if we use this relative poverty line, a relative poverty measure to explain or to measure the poverty. So we'll know what is the subjective poverty. The subjective poverty line refers to that level of income at which people feel that their income is just equal to the minimum income required to meet and need, right? So it is just a subjective, so people say that this is the income which is required, this is the income which is required to meet minimum requirement of our daily needs. So the drawback of this subjective definition is that this is a very subjective. People with same level of welfare may give different answers of their minimum for their minimum requirements and may be treated differently with respect to poor and non-poor. So this is a very subjective definition. So लोग जो हैं and they will give us different requirements of their minimum requirements of their income which is required to meet their basic needs, basic necessities of life. The third types of poverty is the absolute poverty. Absolute poverty line is defined as the minimum socially acceptable level of income or consumption. So a minimum level socially acceptable level of income or consumption used to distinguish the poor from non-poor. So this individual, the individuals below the poverty line are poor. So under this type of poverty, it is defined as the minimum socially acceptable level of income or consumption which is used to distinguish the poor from non-poor, and the individuals who falls below than this line are considered poor. Now consistency requires that poverty line remains constant across regions. In real terms, across regions it should remain same. So a poverty line represents a specific minimum level of income or consumption needed to satisfy basic physical needs such as food, clothing, shelter, education, health in order to ensure continued survival. So हम ये कह सकते हैं कि जो poverty है, poverty line represents the minimum requirement of minimum level of income or consumption जिसकी ज़रूरत होती है to satisfy basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, education and health in order to survive in the country or survive in order to survive, right? So survival के लिए जो basic needs चाहिए होते हैं इंसान को, poverty line हम कह सकते हैं कि that is the poverty line is defined as the minimum level of income or consumption which is required to satisfy basic needs, which are required to satisfy basic needs in terms of houses, in terms of housing, shelters, clothes and food and education, which are required for surviving, right? The extent of absolute poverty is therefore defined as the number of people who are unable to command sufficient resources to satisfy the need. तो हम ये कह सकते हैं absolute poverty की जब हम बात करते हैं इस तरह से उसको define कर सकते हैं. It is defined as the number of people who are unable to command sufficient resources to satisfy their basic needs. So the poverty line is set at a level that remains constant in real terms so that we can measure our progress on absolute level over time. So the key message from these two slides is that poverty line must not be changed, right, over time. It must remain constant. इसको change नहीं होना चाहिए. Reason ये है कि if poverty lines keep on changing, you cannot measure how much you have reduced the poverty or how much is the increase in the poverty over the time period. तो आप उसको measure नहीं कर सकते कि मुख्तलिफ टाइमिंग्स में पावर्टी में, गुर्बत में कितनी कमी आई है या कितना इजाफा हुआ है. अगर पावर्टी कांस्टेंट ना रहो, चेंज पावर्टी लाइन सेम ना रहे, अगर आप उसको सेम ना रखें तो इट इज़ डिफ़िकल्ट फॉर अस और फॉर द कंट्रीज, फॉर द इकोनॉमी to measure the change in poverty over time. So the important or the key message is that poverty line must not be changed, right? अगर ये चेंज होती रहती है तो आपको एग्जैक्ट अंदाज़ा नहीं होता कि गुर्बत में मुल्क में कितनी कमी वाक़ हुई है या कितना इजाफा हुआ है, right? So it is important to measure the changes in poverty over time, that the poverty line must not be changed. It should remain same across the regions. Now, what are the poverty indices? Poverty indices. There are two poverty indices, two types of poverty indices. One is the head count ratio, the other is poverty gap. Now, what is the head count ratio? It is defined as the proportion of people living below the poverty line. This measure is easy to calculate. However, it takes no account of the depth of the poverty. So ये ऐसा measure है, it is defined as the proportion of those people who are living below the poverty line. It is easy to calculate, but however, it does not tell us the depth of the poverty. So the head count ratio is nevertheless the most widely used poverty estimate for measuring the poverty in a country or in an economy. If we talk about the poverty gap measures the depth of poverty in a country. It also measures the total income necessary to raise everyone who is below poverty line up to that line. Poverty gap हमें ये बताता है, एक तो हमें it tells us the depth of the poverty. It also tells us the minimum income required for the people who are poor to raise their level, to raise their standard to up to the poverty line. A lower value would indicate that most of the people are bunched around the poverty line. तो इसकी जो lower value, अगर poverty gap की lower value है तो हम ये कहते हैं कि बहुत सारे लोग जो हैं, most of the people are bunched around the poverty line. They are around the poverty line. So the difference between head count ratio and the poverty gap is that Headcount ratio basically is measure. It tells us it defined as the proportion of people who live below the poverty line. This is a very easy to calculate, but it does not tells us the depth of the poverty line. So the poverty gap जो है वो हमें बताता है, एक तो हमें बताता है कितने लोग poverty line से कम है, और it also tells us the depth of the poverty line, how serious is the poverty in the country or in the economy, right? So the total income necessary to raise everyone who is below the poverty line up to that particular line. So a lower value so when we have a lower value of the poverty gap, so that indicates that most of the poor are bunched around the poverty line. And as we said that the last part हम बात करेंगे, we'll try to discuss the methods of estimating poverty, how we can estimate poverty in different countries, कौन से तरीक़ेकार हैं जो यूज़ किए जाते हैं poverty को, गुर्बत को measure करने के लिए. Now one of the method is measuring poverty is calories intake method. So the calorie approach to set the poverty line is based on minimum food requirement expressed in terms of calories intake per day. So according to this approach, according to calories approach, the poverty line is based on the minimum food requirement expressed in terms of minimum calories intake per day. कितनी कैलोरीज एक बंदे को रिक्वायर्ड होती हैं पर डे सर्वाइवर के लिए, तो दैट इज़ दी कैलोरीज इनटेक मेथड. सो मिनिमम कैलोरीज कितनी चाहिए होती हैं. सो हियर वी टॉक अबाउट income versus consumption as a welfare indicator. The consumption is preferred, so when we compare the consumption and income for the calories intake method, we prefer consumption. Now consumption is preferred for the following reason: it is more smoother than income. इनकम से ज़्यादा स्मूथ तरीके से इसको मेजर किया जा सकता है. इनकम इज़ subject to seasonal variability, while consumption is less variable. Consumption is considered more direct indicator of achievement and fulfillment of basic needs as compared to income. Respondents in developing countries are reluctant to reveal their income, and they can tell their consumptions. Consumption is more easily observable and measurable concept than the income. Consumption aggregate is comprehensive. It consists of food items, clothing, shelter, education, health, fuel, and utilities. Now, adjustment of consumption to consumption aggregate is that while expenditure, because you know expenditure could be between food and non-food items, are recorded at the household level, poverty needs to be measured at the individual level. Adjustment is required because consumption includes both types of consumption. It is the consumption at the individual level, it is the consumption about the household level, but poverty needs to be measured at the individual level. Now adjustment consumption expenditure by the size and composition of the household. So adjustment in consumption is required by the size and composition of the household. Similarly, adult equivalent scale with a weight 0.8 to individual youngers, and then 18 years old, and 1 for all other individuals. So normally the weight which we use to measure poverty for the people who are 18 or under 18 is 0.8, and the weight which is used for the people above 18 is 1. So poverty line be updated between the two surveys by price indices. The most widely used method is to adjust poverty line with CPI, that is with the consumer price index based inflation. So the inflation which is measured by using the consumer price index, so that is important to adjust poverty in line. This method allows for changes in prices, but the consumption basket associated with poverty lines remains unchanged. Thus poverty line remains constant over time. So we can say that poverty line remains constant over time. So why poverty estimates can differ? Why different people estimate different poverty line? Poverty estimates are highly sensitive to variety of factors. पावर्टी एस्टिमेट जो है डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स हैं, बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हैं जिनसे सेंसिटिव होती है, जो कि पावर्टी को इफेक्ट कर सकते हैं. द वेरी बेसिस ऑफ ड्राइंग द पावर्टी लाइन में डिफर अक्रॉस रिसर्चर्स. डिफरेंट रिसर्चर्स के दरमियान डिफरेंट जो है फैक्टर्स होते हैं, वो डिफरेंट वेट देते हैं डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स को, जिसकी वजह से हम कह सकते हैं कि पावर्टी लाइन जो है वो डिफरेंट हो सकती है. जब अभी हमने कैलोरीज इनटेक अप्रोच की बात की, सो वी कैन डिफरेंट रिसर्चर्स कंसीडर डिफरेंट थिंग्स लाइक वी कैन टॉक अबाउट कैलोरीज इनटेक अप्रोच और बेसिक नीड्स अप्रोच. तो वी in the beginning we said that poverty line can be defined in how much basic needs, basic facilities are available to the individual, to the societies in the country. अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि if peoples or individuals are lack in basic needs, are lack in basic facilities like for example education, health, sanitation and water, तो उनको कमी है, तो हम कहते हैं कि the people are poor. रिसेंटली कुछ लोग ये कहते हैं, कुछ रिसर्चर ये कहते हैं कैलोरीज इनटेक अप्रोच की अभी हमने बात की, द मिनिमम कैलोरीज रिक्वायर्ड पर डे टू सर्वाइव, right? So for a person, for an individual, so that measures the poverty in the country or in the economy. So within calories intake basis, some may use the minimum requirement for calories intake per day is that 2250 calories. Some say that, कुछ लोग ये कहते हैं the minimum requirement of calories intake is 2550 calories per day. Some says that the minimum requirement is 2350 calories per adult equivalent. So different researchers suggest different calories intake per day. तो हम ये कहते हैं कि अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि अगर कुछ लोग ये कहते हैं कि 2250 कैलोरीज रिक्वायरमेंट होती हैं ज़िंदा रहने के लिए, अगर लोगों को 2250 कैलोरीज मिल जाती हैं तो हम कहते हैं दीज पीपल्स आर नॉट पुअर. इसी तरह कुछ रिसर्चर्स ये कहते हैं, कुछ इकोनॉमिस्ट ये कहते हैं कि मिनिमम रिक्वायरमेंट पर डे इज़ दी 2550. सम सेज दैट the requirement जो minimum calories की है that is 2350. तो it varies among researchers. इसी तरह poverty estimate जो है differs कर सकते हैं because of the use of different inflation measures. Some researchers uses CPI, some uses SPI, that is sensitive pricing, some uses WPI, wholesale price indexes, right? So if we use different measures of inflation, the researchers use different measures of inflation, so that give us different poverty estimates. Similarly, it depends if some of the researchers use consumption to measure poverty estimate, some use income to measure poverty estimate. So if we use consumption or income by measuring poverty, so by this factor we can get different estimates. Similarly, same poverty line for rural or urban areas versus different poverty lines for the two. So poverty estimates could be different for different regions within the country. Like if we talk about rural and urban areas, so it could be different or it could be same, or so different researchers could find different poverty line for rural areas or urban areas. Now it could also, poverty estimates could also differ or can be also different because of the different basket of commodities, right? जब आप inflation measure करते हैं तो you use a basket of commodities which basically tells us how much is the inflation in that particular time period in the economy, right? So different researchers use, or different country use different basket of commodities. So because of using different basket of commodities to measure inflation in the country, in the economy, उसकी वजह से भी poverty estimate different हो सकती हैं. So there are different factors. Our poverty estimate are very sensitive to different factors that become a cause of difference in poverty estimates over time in different countries. तो जिसमें हमने calories की बात की, different calorie intakes की बात की, different measures of inflation की बात की. We have talked about difference in consumption and income. We have also talked about the poverty line in urban areas and rural areas में difference हो सकता है. और basket of commodities में difference हो सकता है in the countries or between the countries. So these are the factors which about which poverty estimates are very sensitive or highly sensitive, right? And because of these factors, poverty estimates could be different in the country or between the countries. So this was all about today's. So what we have learned in today's class, just I will overview for a few minutes and then we will end up with this lecture. So at the macro level, economic growth implies greater availability of public resources to improve quality and quantity of education, health and other services. At micro level, economic growth creates employment opportunities, increase the income of the people and therefore reduce poverty. So in the beginning we talked about that economic growth or poverty की बात की हमने, that we said that economic growth is essential, is important for poverty reduction. So at macro level, economic growth implies greater availability of public resources in terms of education, health, communications, social services to the society, which reduce poverty. At micro level, it increase employment opportunities. When it increase employment opportunities for the people, for the individuals, that increase the income and reduce poverty in the economy. Poverty, उसके बाद हमने we defined, so we said that growth is important component, very important to reduce poverty in the economy, because growth होगी, GDP बढ़ेगी तो per capita income बढ़ेगी, standard of living बढ़ेगा और poverty में, गुर्बत में कमी वाक़या होगी. Poverty is generally defined as the lack of command over resources to satisfy basic needs. So poverty को हमने define किया is the lack of command over resources which are required to satisfy basic needs such as mainly food, shelter and clothing. This approach is basically an income approach as it measures the degree of lowness of income or consumption in the society. तो इस approach को हम income approach कहते हैं और because it measures the degree of lowness income and consumption in the society. उसके बाद हमने बात की a relative, we have talked about the types of poverty. There are different types of poverty in different countries. Like a relative poverty line is set around 50% of the average per capita income of the country. Then we have talked about the subjective poverty. Subjective poverty line refers to that level of income at which people feels that their income is just equal to a minimum required to meet at end. Then we have talked about the absolute poverty. Absolute poverty line is defined as a minimum socially acceptable level of income or consumption used to distinguish the poor from non-poor. So minimum level of income जो required होता है या consumption का, जिससे आप differentiate कर सकते हैं गरीब को एक non-poor आदमी से. So that is the absolute poverty line. And then we have talked about different how we measure, how we can estimate poverty. Poverty can be estimated or measured by different methods. So one is the calories intake method, जिसमें हमने बात की the minimum required calories intake per day. अगर वो पूरी नहीं हो रही किसी मुल्क में, लोगों को इंडिविजुअल पूरी नहीं हो रही होती, तो हम कह सकते हैं कि the people are considered poor. There are different minimum calories intake. कुछ लोगों ने कहा कि it is 2250, some people say that 2550, some says that it is the 2350. So if the people or the individual of a country or of an economy are not taking minimum required calories per day, so they are considered poor. They are poor people in the country or in the economy. So we can say that poverty is it's a sensitive issue for the countries, for the economies, and it can be reduced by introducing different policies in the countries and the economies. जैसा कि हमने देखा, हमने बात की कि बहुत सारे ममालिक ने पिछले कुछ अरसे में पॉवर्टी को कमी करने के लिए, रिडक्शन के लिए डिफरेंट पॉलिसीज इंट्रोड्यूस की, और बहुत सारे ममालिक में गुर्बत में कमी भी वाक़या आई, और जिसमें हमने एग्जाम्पल दी लाइक चाइना, ईस्ट एशिया की बात की. सो मलेशिया की हमने बात की, बट मोस्ट ऑफ द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज जिनमें ग्रोथ में इतनी सस्टेन ग्रोथ लॉन्ग टर्म में नहीं आई और जिनमें ज़्यादा गुर्बत में कमी वाक़या नहीं हो सकी. So this is all about today's lecture. So I will stop my lecture today. I hope कि आपको what basically this is just a theoretical lecture. तो अगर आप किताब में से अगर poverty का एक chapter पढ़ लेंगे, if you look at the chapter, just give a reading, so you can understand poverty. What is poverty, how we define poverty, and how we measure poverty. It is very easy to understand. It is a theoretical concept. So please just give a reading to the chapter about poverty in the recommended book. It is given in the book. So till the next time, आपसे मुलाकात हो. Allah Hafiz. God bless you.